Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And today I have the one and only Jim Pfaff. I think I'm saying his name right. Pfaff, I think. We'll ask him. How about that? Anyway, stay with us. We're going to have Jim come on, talk about everything he's doing, tell his life story, a condensed version of it, and hopefully change some lives. So if you would do me a favor and share this out to everybody you know, let's get a bunch of people on here. We're going to hear from Jim here shortly. So stay with us. We will be right back. Okay, we're back. Let me bring Jim on. Jim, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you.
Good to have you here, man. So, thank you for being here, and I'm grateful for that. I think that, I was looking this morning. Do you know Queen Anti-Commie, right?
I know of, yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking to her on a phone call, and I'm like, I was doing some research. I'm like, oh my gosh, I keep saying I've had this show for 6 years. It's actually been over 7 years I've been doing this show now.
Wow.
I'm like, whoa, I was off a whole year. But I love talking about how people go through hard times and overcome it and succeed anyway. And I would love to talk about that with you today. So why don't we start with you? Tell everybody where you were born and raised. We'll start there.
Well, and by the way, first of all, just from your intro, it is Pfaff, not Pfaff. So drop the first
Pfaff.
Yeah, that's
Pfaff.
That's my dad's family's fault in German, and it has German origins. Although my family originally comes from the Alsace region of France in ancient, long-term Prussia back in the 19th century. But it would be Pfaff is how you would pronounce it in German. But Pfaff is how we've Americanized it. I always tell people I'm from Indianapolis. We run a little race there you might have heard of. And,
yeah.
Born and raised on the south side of Indianapolis. Been to the race many times. Indiana is the racing capital of the world, and it's the basketball capital of the world.
It is.
And so anyway, raised in Indianapolis, went to Indiana University for college. Actually, I went to a private school in Tennessee. It's kind of an elite private school, I guess you could say, called the Webb School in a town called Bell Buckle, a private boarding school. When I was there, I was kind of a troubled kid going into it, but I very quickly came to Christ while I was there, and I've been a believer in Christ and follower of Christ for all this time since. That was 1981. Wow. And so it was a great school. I learned a whole lot. The recent demise of the Wall Street Journal comes to mind because Vermont Royster, the longtime editor of the Wall Street Journal, was a graduate of my high school as well, too. That was always sort of a proud thing. He actually made the Wall Street Journal what it became. And so Wayne Rogers of MASH fame, who was also a great finance guy, he also went to our school, served on the board of trustees for many years before he died. And but my background is a Hoosier background, having been born and raised in Indianapolis. And in fact, today I'm at my house in Bloomington, Indiana, away from D.C. for a couple weeks around my wife's birthday. And we try to, we're home about 20-30% of the year. So
wow. Yeah. So you have a house in Bloomington, and so I actually have a really good friend and client of mine that's pretty well known. His name is Glenn Bill, that lives up there. Big realtor. Not just big as in tall, but like he's very well known.
He sells a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And I'm from the neighboring Columbus area, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
Columbus, Indiana, or Ohio?
Ohio,
Yeah,
Ohio.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, that's awesome, man.
It's a
So
great part of the country, by the way. I mean,
it is.
a lot of wonderful. I just saw a comment that came up. A lady said that she used to live in Speedway and they'd leave the town during the 500. That's a very real thing.
Yeah.
I lived on the south side of Indianapolis for a long time, actually in Greenwood, Indiana, just south of Indianapolis, and you could feel for the whole month of May, you could feel the effects of people coming into town for the race, literally for a whole month when I was growing up, all the way down into Greenwood, which is on a normal day about a 20-minute drive away. But we would go to the race, and it would take 4 hours from our home in Greenwood to get all the way up to sit down in the race. It's crazy traffic around it. It really is a huge event.
It really is. I mean, it's a lot easier if you have a private jet and you can fly into and take a helicopter to the what do they call it, the infield.
Yeah.
But
Well, and interestingly, another quick part of my Indiana history, I'm one of the original employees of the FedEx hub in Indianapolis.
wow.
Opened that up. They had bought it from Pearl Later Courier, an old overnight company at one time. They bought that facility. I was one of the original hirees in there. My picture is still up on the wall. They have a picture of the original 300 employees, and I'm still up. I had someone take it some months ago and confirm it for me. But
Wow.
during the race, and of course it's a Sundays, and package, working packages was only for a short time on a Saturday. People would be flying in on a Saturday. Many of those private jets would park at the FedEx facility when I was working there in the late 80s, early 90s. So
Is that right there off of 70, right?
yeah, exactly.
If you're headed west, it's over to the right. It's pretty.
Yep.
It's pretty noticeable.
It's very noticeable. It's 3 times larger than the original facility when they bought it. It is a huge facility now there. But I worked all up and down in that area, and I loved working for FedEx. I think it's one of the great American success stories.
I agree. Totally agree with that. So you said you went to a private high school.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So from what grade to what grade? There's Shell. We love Shell, and Buckster's on here.
Waving at Shell.
Awesome. So awesome.
Yeah.
I spent a little bit of time. Well, one time I went to, I think it was Sunshine Music Center, I believe. It's an outdoor amphitheater. I may have gone for a concert that I don't recall a whole lot of, but that was way back before I got saved. And but anyway, yeah. So Indy's a great town. I love Indianapolis.
It is.
And it's actually called the sister twin city to Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
So they're very, very similar. Very similar.
Yeah, they are in many ways. Capital cities. The size is similar.
We love Nicole too. Let's just tell her.
Oh, hey, Nicole.
We love you, Nicole. Yeah, it's very similar, and it's a. What I like about Indy and Columbus is it's not like Dayton, Ohio. Dayton is kind of an industrial town.
It is.
It's like, and no offense to anybody from Dayton. What's that?
In an Air Force town, right, Pat?
Yep. And it's but like Columbus and Indianapolis are more like service oriented. I don't want to say white collar towns, but they kind of are a little bit. Yeah.
Oh yeah, a little bit of industrial stuff there, but yeah, you're right. Service industry really dominates.
Yeah. So you went to this. I can't relate to going to a boarding school. What was that like? So here, like ninth grade on, or what grade did you start?
In high school. I went there in high school.
Okay.
And although it was a 7th grade to 12th grade school, you would have pre-high school kids boarding there as well. Best way to describe it is, if anyone has seen Dead Poets Society, the student life was incredibly similar to what I lived. The only difference is we didn't have to wear uniforms, and we didn't have some quirky weirdo administration either,
Right.
as depicted there. But
Right.
it was amazing when I watched Dead Poets Society for the first time, the nostalgia about the web school that I had. It was so similar. In fact, there are scenes in there where they went into some cave and they were reading poetry together. That is literally what I did. We had a nearby cave, underneath what we called a mountain we called Old Baldy, right by the web school. We would go into that cave and do those very things. I mean, minus the girls. We didn't have girls coming there, but doing things like reading poetry or just talking about stuff. So it was kind of eerily similar to the boarding school life I had.
Wow. So what were you? I mean, I would almost feel like going, and you can correct me. I just can't relate. But did you feel like, oh, my parents shipped me off to a boarding school and they don't want me?
No, not in my case. I mean, that wasn't the case at all. My parents were very purposeful about wanting to add to a structured environment and actually to increase academic capability. And I was very fortunate. My parents at the time were pretty wealthy. My dad owned 103 Burger Chef restaurants at the time. He had a very large chain of fast food restaurants. And he, so he was able to provide for that. But there were people who were my classmates who were in exactly that situation. Now, my graduating class, 42 people, there were, I think, on the order of 300 or 400 kids total. Some that drove in because they lived in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which was near Shelbyville, and a few from Nashville, but very few. But they would drive in daily. They had a bus that came in, and then the rest of us boarded. But it was probably about 400 students through all grades, 400 or 500 students through all grades. And again, my graduating class was 42. So you had a mix of people who were getting shipped off and those who weren't. It was a lot of wealthy families. You had a handful of kids who were there on scholarships, not from wealthy families, very, very intelligent and capable, and it was actually a great program because it gave some of these people a leg up. I mean, it was an Ivy League feeder school. Probably, I think on the order of 25% or more of my class went to the Ivy League. And or to top colleges otherwise. So it was, for me, it was an excellent experience because I became a follower of the way, and Jesus touched my heart and made me
in high school.
In high school.
Wow.
I got ostracized for it in a way too. Keep in mind, this is a small school environment. A lot of people that were negative, but I also had a lot of really good friends, many of which I talk about today. In fact, one of my friends who did graduated with me, whose family did have him drive down from Murfreesboro, he's a pastor in the Columbus, Ohio area now, and has been for many, many years. Another friend that is really close still, he works on Wall Street. He's retired now, but he did mergers and acquisition work there. Got other friends who have been involved in finance. And so I had a lot of very interesting friends that I knew, and net, it was a great experience. There's one interesting thing about the web school. For those who know academia, Princeton has what they call the Princeton Honor Code. And it's very famous in academic circles because what they do is have non-proctored exams, for example, amongst other things, non-proctored exams, and you pledge on your own that you don't cheat. We had that at our school. In fact, the Princeton Honor Code has its origins in the web school. Some web school graduates in the 19-teens were going to Princeton, and somehow or another Princeton found out about it, and it was implemented by Woodrow Wilson, who was then president of Princeton. So
wow. So where so you graduate from this private high school, boarding school. And then where'd you go from there? Did you go to college? What happened?
I was accepted at Wheaton College. I ended up going to Indiana University, which I'm glad for. I met my wife there, so that was one good thing.
God has a
But
plan.
it was is excellent. But you know, I was able to be near home, and I had thoughts of maybe going to law school, and I decided not to. But I was an English major. I did a few political science classes. I always tell I haven't been in politics for 30 years. I tell people, you know, forget the political science class. That ain't going to help you. But the
Right.
English degree did help me because I've had to work in communication for a long period of time. It was English writing and literature. So to get that literature background has helped put perspective on the historical significance of what happens in the political realm, so that I'm able to utilize those skills to hopefully give people an understanding of what's really going on, and again, put it in not only historical context, but also to bring the lessons of history into it. And that, I think that's been really important and helpful for me. But I'm glad I went there. I enjoyed Indiana University. It's a great campus, one of the best campuses in the country. Beautiful.
Awesome.
In a state that isn't necessarily so beautiful, except this part of the state, Southwest Indiana, and which is very hilly and lots of woods. It's just a great area. Bloomington was a fun town, far more left wing now than it used to be, but liberal back then. But still a fun area to live. And we have our house down near Lake Monroe, which is a 10,000 acre reservoir just southeast of town. And again, we have about an acre down here, surrounded by woods. We love this place.
That's awesome. So you know, and just so everybody that hasn't been to Indiana knows, or Ohio, the center part of both of those states is pretty flat.
Oh, yeah.
And
It is.
you're like driving on I-70 across, and it's like, is there anything out there like at all?
Well, the only thing worse in most people's minds is I-70 through Kansas, which actually I love. And I'm sure if we're talking about me, we'll get to it. But I've lived most of this century in Colorado, honestly, from work I've done. But driving out to Colorado on the plains is actually beautiful to me. But a lot of people get real bored with Kansas. And it's very Kansas-like to drive through Ohio and Indiana. It's funny because when I come back here, I drive from D.C. because I bring my car with me, and I bring my whole office with me as well because I work here. But as you're driving past Wheeling, West Virginia, Zanesville, Ohio, suddenly it's boring and flat after a while.
Oh, God.
And it is that way.
It gets bad. It gets really bad. Like, you can't have like a sleep issue because you'll fall asleep driving on that. But yeah, I mean, I'm from there. I've been all over Ohio. I've been in probably about every town in Ohio, being in sales and traveling the state in the past. But I think that, people from the Midwest just tend to have a pretty good heart and demeanor about overall, I think. But here I live in Texas now. I live north of Dallas, and people in Texas, I'm like, wow, people are so nice in Texas too. So I don't know. Maybe it just is it depends on your attitude, maybe more than anything.
Well, Indiana, there's a famous saying of "Who's your hospitality?" I mean, I think people in the Midwest are nice in a different way than folks in the South. I lived in the South and I loved it. I love Tennessee. I'm a Tennessee Volunteers football fan because I gave up on IU football many years ago. But I think that there's a lot of positive to be said. That I think one of the reasons too that people in Indiana tend to be, and Midwest in general, tend to be a little bit more wise than some areas of the country. And I lived in the West, and there's a lot of unwise people there, evidenced by what you see happening in Colorado. But one of the things about Midwest people is their roots come from strong farming communities, a decent-sized industrial base where people worked hard all the time to take care of their families. There is actually a lot of recreation, so if you like to fish or hunt, there's a lot of areas in the Midwest to do that. So you have some of those sorts of roots, and I think that that general work ethic. Of course, the strong church communities in the Midwest, just like the South. And again, in a different way, there's a different English on the ball, so to speak, but you still have that firm commitment to ultimate reality and ultimate truth.
Yep.
And all those things combine to give a certain sort of wisdom that I think people respect all over the place. Texas has a lot of that too, There's not as much farming except in southeast Texas maybe, or east Texas, but you've got all the oil communities, you've got a little bit of an industrial base, and you have that same foundation in ultimate truth, and that our rights come from God, and that God matters in our lives, and we're responsible to him. Those things combine for something very useful and powerful. Most of the countries like that, actually. And even the Northeast used to be that way, and it's much less now after so many years since the revolution, sadly. But yeah, it's a great foundation to come from.
Yes. Nicole's saying, my nephew played for UT number 19. I grew up in Ohio and Indiana. Midwest people are great. Yeah, no, I think that there is something to say about that, but I moved, I moved to North Texas, and I have a daughter who's in high school, and she's dynamic cheerleader, and so one of the things I like about Texas is they don't do oh, there's Steve Loves Ammo. You know Steve, don't you?
Yeah.
You know Steve? Steve, good dude. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you sharing. But here in Texas, like they pray before football games over the loudspeaker, over the loudspeaker in the stadium. I'm like, oh my gosh, where am I in a free country all of a sudden? Because they don't do that in Ohio. They've moved a little too far left in some of those Midwest states. I don't know. Is that how it is in Indiana?
I would say it is. That's changed from when I was young. And
right.
I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and you would see that sort of thing. But they're serious about it in Texas. And Ohio should be the same way, because there's always been a strong religious foundation, and it's just about as much of a football state as Texas is. Texas just has a lot more of it because it's a lot bigger maybe. But two great football states, you would imagine that. But we're a basketball state. You would see prayer before basketball games as well. I mean, by the way, quick side note, in India has the 10 largest high school basketball stadiums in the world. And I think there's now 9, because I think there's one in Texas that finally got up into the top 10. But Newcastle, Indiana, where the famous NBA player Kent Benson played, he was also on the 76 undefeated team for IU. That Newcastle high school gym, I think it's 12 or 13,000 people that it seats. It's a high school gym.
I know, it's crazy.
And football's like that. Football stadiums are like that in high schools in Texas, I know. So
God, I live near Prosper, Texas, and Prosper has I think it's a $75 million football stadium. It's bigger than some college football stadiums.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
I mean, the one that it's a $35-40 million stadium at our high school. It's just it's unbelievable.
It is.
I mean, football is literally a second. There's God, football, and barbecue.
Yeah, God, football, barbecue, then family.
That's right. That's right. That's it. That's literally the order too. That's funny. But no, I think that. And listen, I grew up in a small farming community. Most of my friends were, farmers or lived on farms. And so I grew up I hated going to some of their houses because it was like, oh, God, we're going to bale hay. Nah, I don't know about that. But it does teach you a work ethic that I think a lot of our current new generation lacks.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all of them. I'm not going to pick that fight with anybody, but I think that I think they could use going and working on a farm for a summer for sure.
Oh yeah. Did you do corn detasseling? I did.
Do what?
Corn detasseling?
No, what's that?
Well, when you're growing feed corn, you take the tassels off so that it does not germinate. And
no, I did not
that's
do that.
considered better feed for cattle. And you're literally lifting your hands up, pulling tassels off of 6-foot high stalks, tiring, grueling work. But you learn something with all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's regardless of what it is, baling hay, corn detasseling. I remember having to shuck corn like all the time. That's like something we just did. You have dinner and you got, but like I just think that that you have to. Our kids need to learn how to work, man.
Agreed.
I don't know how else to say it, but so talk about. So you went to Indiana University, and what was your degree in again?
English, literature, and language.
And you did not do the political science thing.
Well, I took a few political science classes. I technically have a minor in political science.
Yeah. Do you know Dr. Corsi, Jerome Corsi?
I'm a member of Council for National Policy, and I see him there from time to time. We're not anything, but yeah, I'm familiar with him, and we've talked a few times.
He's a friend of mine. That guy is, man, he is a genius when it comes to political science.
He is.
On a different level. But anyway, so you get out of college, and what happens from there? You're still living in Indiana, right? Yeah. Where did you go from there? What direction did your career take?
And it was just at the end of college. I went to work for FedEx, so I was doing that as well as selling cars. Frankly, when I went out of college, I and also sold cellular phones. You used to sell cellular phones. You used to have salesmen because it was you're mostly going towards business potential clients who needed that on a day-to-day basis. Most other people didn't. This is in the early 90s.
And selling it for $3 a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Cell One, right? You were with Cell One?
I was with Cellular One in Indianapolis.
So was I.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's crazy.
But I did that for a little bit. Along the way, interestingly, I got connected with Mike Pence when he was running Indiana Policy Review.
Wow.
And I was in his office one day talking to him on the Circle in downtown Indianapolis. And I said, I really want to get involved somehow, at least take a shot at paid politics. Of course, I was the young, naive kid that said that didn't know that that's really the worst career anyone could ever choose to take, honestly. I had been involved in college with a Ralph Reed startup. Ralph Reed, formerly of Christian Coalition, now Faith and Freedom Coalition. Ralph was just coming off the executive directorship of college Republicans nationally, and he started an organization called Students for America. I was involved in the founding of that organization while I was in Indiana. I went to Virginia for the founding conference of this, and all the great conservative leaders that I met and knew at that time. But so I'd always had this passion for wanting to get involved in that in some way that could be useful. So I'm in Mike's office seeking his advice, and he introduces me to a guy he was about to meet right after named George Whitwer. Now, George had started an organization called Opportunity Project of Indiana, which was a grassroots economic conservative organization. He was a pro-family, pro-life guy, but he put an economic emphasis because one of the key characteristics of Republican Midwest states is that there are also big government monstrosities, to be candid. Yeah. And he wanted to fight back against that. Of course, I was obviously wholeheartedly on that. So I went to work for George in the 92-94 cycles. And that was 92 that I was introduced to him.
Yeah.
And then George decided to run for governor, and I ran his primary campaign for governor. Now, he came really close to beating the Indianapolis mayor then, Steve Goldsmith, and Rex Early, who had just stopped being the state party chairman to run. It was like 35, 34, 32. George came really close. It was a three-way race. It was close. George got the lieutenant governor nod. I helped him get that because you don't do that through election in Indiana. The parties nominate their lieutenant governor candidate. and
Right.
I helped with the floor battle on that. But that was my first experience in politics, and after that, I went to work for Indiana Family Institute, which was headed up by a man who was in the future to be Mike Pence's chief of staff on Capitol Hill,
Wow.
Bill Smith, and he was my boss there. So I did that for a little bit. Then I thought, okay, I've got to get back. This has been fun. I've had a blast. I've had some success, but now I got to get a real job. So I went into insurance, and so I was a property and casualty, health and life agent. I did group benefits. I did auto and homeowner insurance. Mike and Karen Pence were clients of mine for a time while I was doing that.
Wow.
But I got drugged back into politics eventually, doing political consulting. I moved to Arizona, and then during that time, there was a guy named Tim Hulskamp who was a state senator in Kansas and got a marriage amendment on the ballot, and he had contacted Focus on the Family and saying, I need someone to help me run this thing. And a guy who you may have heard of named Jim Banks, who was a friend I'd been a mentor to and a friend of mine, he told the folks at Focus, Tom Minery in particular, and Dr. Dobson, he said, no, you got to have Jim Pfaff do that. For those who may not know, Jim is now a U.S. Senator from Indiana. And he was working at Focus on the time. So I went to work for Tim and helped him with that. And then shortly after, Focus on the Family hired me to be a national representative for family policy councils.
And this is all in Arizona.
Well, I was in Arizona at the time, but I moved to Colorado Springs in 2005
Got it.
to go work for Focus thereafter.
Okay.
And that's what took me to Colorado. So I've lived out west for a large portion of this century. I did that. I was in Colorado doing that. I ended up eventually getting on the radio in Denver. I had a daily radio show for 4 years during this whole process. And then in 2010, Tim Hulskamp won the nomination for Congress in the 1st District of Kansas. And we had remained very close friends. And I was trying to help him find a chief of staff, and then he asked me to be his eventually. And so I ended up on Capitol Hill. And he and I remain very close friends today. Great guy, one of the great congressmen that we've had on for fiscal conservative purposes and also social conservative purposes, strongly involved in the pro-life movement. But I went to work for him, and that started my journey on Capitol Hill. So that's kind of the early part of my life.
So you went to Capitol Hill. So you moved to D.C.
No, I did not. I was literally flying every weekend back and forth to my home in Colorado Springs. And I did not, had 2 young boys. I did not want them growing up in the D.C. area. I had to do it on my own expense. Congressmen have their flights back and forth home paid by the what's called the MRA, the Members Representational Allowance. Their office budget pays their flights back and forth. I had to do it out of my own pocket and also rent a place out of my own pocket. Now, you can only do that on chief of staff pay, but it was a real challenge, but I was not going to have my family living in Washington, D.C. I wanted none of that. So for those 4 years I worked for Tim, that's what I was doing. We eventually moved to South Carolina, and I was flying back and forth on a much shorter flight.
Yeah. I was like, I'm sitting here calculating that had to be a long flight back and forth, at least 3 hours, I think.
And I didn't typically have a good direct flight that I felt I could afford, so I would change up in either Atlanta or Chicago to get there. So you're talking about sometimes, I don't know, 6-7 hours of flight time total.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap. Wow. And you did that every week?
Every weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So you'd leave Friday night?
Yeah. Friday midday if I could.
Oh my gosh.
And I'd get home late at night on Friday, stay Saturday and Sunday, and fly back on Monday morning because on days that Congress was not in session on a Monday, then I was relatively flexible, although I took a very early flight, usually left about 5 o'clock in the morning. But on days we were in session on Mondays, I could still get there in time and well before session started, because I usually wouldn't start doing floor business until the evening, and then I could typically get there like noon or 1 and start working. So
in my very, very, very limited um, exposure to politics, I have a very good friend who was state senator in Ohio for two terms, and then he termed out. Kevin Bacon, super super guy. But so Kevin, termed out. But I'd worked on his website, and we'd build his websites and stuff for his campaign and all that. But I've seen just a little bit. But for the average person, I think in this country, we talk a lot about down ballot voting, R, or D, whatever it is. Like, I'm not voting for those damn Republicans, or whatever.
Yeah.
But talk about what, in your opinion, the average voter, the average person in this country that does vote, what are they missing? What are they not really seeing? Because I feel like there's a lot that are they're just missing things that they don't know about, maybe.
Well, one of the reasons for that, before I get into what they're missing, I think the why question is important. And the reason why they don't typically know all that is because they're just trying to live their lives.
Right. Right.
The American Constitution was founded, and really every state constitution all of which were very similar to the federal Constitution. They strictly limited government action. And it was about as important to be a congressman at our founding as it was to be a school board member or to be involved in the local legislature. They met part-time. The scope of legislation involved was not broad. You'd have important things come up from time to time. In the first two presidential administrations, Washington and Adams, you did have threats of war that came up, and so they did need to address certain issues like that. So it would be important from time to time. But basically, they were highly limited. In fact, I make the statement regularly now. If you look closely at Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which outlines what Congress is authorized to legislate upon, if we followed that prescription, probably 75% of what we do in government would not be done right now. That's how far astray we've gone. Okay, so there was a time when it didn't matter that much for people. And not that people were lazy, everyone's interested, and there were important things, so people would pay attention to a certain degree. But it just wasn't, their day-to-day lives were not being influenced by it. Well,
right.
Fast forward to today, and really within the last, since World War II, the federal government plays a very significant role in people's lives, but that hasn't changed their need to just live their life day in and day out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on, a lot more consequential than Americans in the 19th century had to deal with in terms of the federal government. It's far more consequential now, but really people are just trying to live their lives. So that's the why. What they don't know, as I'm beginning to allude to, is things like, why is it that we have a Department of Education? What's the purpose for that? The only purpose for it was to give teachers unions an outlet. I mean, literally, that's why the Department of Education was created, as a way to move money from the states and from individuals so that the government can start determining what needs to happen in education. Now, they wanted to control it. This happened in the Carter administration. They wanted to control education for the federal government. They didn't tell you that. They said they wanted to make it better, because it's so challenging for local communities to be able to fund, what they're trying to do to educate people. And we need to get everybody educated, so we need the resources. Well, here's the problem. Educational skills and capabilities have been in a plateau phase ever since, and probably even just a bit down. Whereas the cost of education has gone way up. And when you look at a line, let me see where I'm at here. If you look at a line and you go from here to here on educational competence and skills, That line is very similar for teachers. It's about like this and goes kind of slightly up. But when it's administrators, that line goes exactly like this. You've got an administrative bloat in education funded because there's extra money coming out of Washington, D.C., which, by the way, was taken out of your state to begin with. So I go through all that to say this. There's no authorization for a Department of Education in the Constitution. Yet we do it, and we spend billions and billions of dollars to do it. And it has affected education. A lot of the recent problems with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the push for transgender rights, and all this sort of thing, that's gotten shoved largely through the education system. It's a vehicle for moving that political effort. Now, whatever your thoughts are on all those things, the reality is that it was a political move to inject that into schools, most of which didn't want anything to do with it. Maybe some of them did, but most of them didn't want to. That came as an edict down from the federal government. This is why there was such hue and cry when Donald Trump pulled all that back and said, we're not doing that through the Department of Education anymore. And we're going to take your funding away if you promote it, right? Which people would say, well, that's just Donald Trump doing his political opinion. No, he's bringing it back to neutrality. So, yeah. But that's just one of a myriad of examples of things that happen in Washington, D.C. that are highly consequential to Americans that they don't have time to dig into in detail. And you have this massive government with all these agencies that even I, as a professional, can't entirely keep up with. So I track this stuff all the time, and I find out things.
Ruh-roh. What happened? Can you guys still hear? Can you hear me? I don't know if what happened here. It's showing we're still on the air. Shows that Jim is offline. Can you guys hear me still? It's showing that I'm still on. Can somebody comment? Let me know if you can still hear me. This is odd. Hello, anybody there? Wow, what is going on? Okay, thank you, Shelly. So it's on Jim's end. I don't see Jim anymore. Okay, thank you, Judy.
And I'm back.
Okay, here we go. He's back.
My internet went out for just a moment. I had to get it. So sorry about that.
It's all right. I thought it was me, but I asked people. They said they could hear me. So yeah. It's all good.
Sorry about that.
It happens. It's the internet. Uh-oh. Yep.
You're
good. There we go. Okay. There we are. So one of the things that I think, I don't even know if this is something you really want to get into, but I'm going to ask anyway. And if you don't want to, just say, I don't want to get into that. The deep state, so a lot of people are like, oh, it's such a conspiracy theory and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think, the NGOs and what Doge found out and all the USAID and all the stuff is, that's real.
It is. It's absolutely real. And yes, I'm willing to get into it because it's one of the greatest problems of our time.
It is.
Quickly on the NGOs, what's significant to understand about that? We did not fund what people know as NGOs out of the federal government in any significant way until the late 20th, early 21st century. And it went on steroids during the Barack Obama administration.
Interesting.
There's no reason to fund NGOs at all. The only money government spends that can be paid, that should be able to be paid out to a private company, is when there is something of real value in exchange that comes back. Most of these NGOs are about hunger around the world, or about helping people become better journalists so we can have a more free, open journal, or to push the idea of America around the world. You know, none of this, first of all, it's not authorized by the Constitution.
There's the don't forget the transgender Muppet show in Pakistan.
Yeah. No, there is no authorization to do that at all, first in the first place.
Right.
But the only money that should go out is when there's a direct benefit. So, for example, and you know, we could talk all day long about the concept of the military-industrial complex, but whatever we decide to do with military, if we're paying a private contractor to build an aircraft, that is appropriate, because there's something of real value that belongs to the government that comes in exchange for that money being sent out. This is, you know, I have deep respect for John Kennedy and so forth, but the one thing that he did that I entirely disagree with was the Peace Corps. But I will say this: if you're going to spend money for that sort of an effort, which I don't think is constitutional, you have to do it the way he did, where it was under the government umbrella and accountable to government. Okay? Yeah. But not these things like happened out of the EPA recently, where when Lee Zeldin came in as Trump's appointee to EPA, he found out there was a $2 billion payment that was going to go out to Stacey Abrams, the former twice failed governor candidate of Georgia, who was going to use it to help people buy, in part, she said, to help people buy energy efficient appliances. And I mean, you don't need, listen, it's not the government's job to buy such things for people, well, directly or indirectly, but that it wasn't going to be used for that anyway. It was going to be used for political activities to help support a certain political perspective. Government needs to be highly limited so that this temptation to take away government being neutral, because everybody's got an opinion. I don't care who you are. Don't tell, I'm a government employee, so you know I'm neutral. No, you're not. You have ideas. You have perspectives. You have a worldview.
Right.
The only way and you have to work towards neutrality, even if you have a worldview. And there have been some government workers who are really good about that, but many others aren't. So that money was designed to advance a political agenda under the auspices of helping the environment. And it was a farce, a $2 billion farce.
I think about, you know, back in 2008 and 9 and 10, when the real estate market collapsed, and my wife and I were, oh my goodness, I had just met her. And she had been downsized she was global VP of marketing for a ginormous company. They got rid of her entire department. Then they sold the company off, and anyway, we lost a house. It was so bad, and that we ended up losing a house. And we went through that whole, Obama put out this thing, and again, this is not an attack. This show's not about attacking any particular party or affiliation, but you know, he put out there was a HAMP, home affordability modification program, and so it was one of those situations where it's like, okay, so we just got to get in touch with. I won't mention the mortgage company, but it rhymes with Hell's Margo. But
Hell's Cargo.
But we went through all this stuff. Here's the thing, and I want you to kind of explain. I may not understand it fully myself, because they put out, and there was so much red tape. They gave Wells Fargo and Bank of America and all these other giant companies these bailouts. Like Wells Fargo got $85 billion to help people keep their homes. And most people didn't get to keep their home. Most people, it was all this red tape, all this BS that you had to go through. We made the payments that they required, and we still, and it was all of this crap. And I think about like all of the red tape and I feel like that there are government agencies that are intentionally putting up red tape walls, so their people will benefit from it, and the average citizen gets screwed.
Yeah, no, there are three things at work there. First of all, is the politician that gets chest because they supposedly did something to help people that they didn't do.
Right.
Secondly, is the government employees in the program who both have very real red tape that are requirements of the bill, but also the incentive to move slowly and to make their job really important so that they can keep it, which they do. I mean, look at the screaming and yelling by when out of a 3 million person civilian employee base in the federal government, some tens of thousands have lost their job, and everyone's going nuts over it. They had job security like crazy. So there's that. They want job security, and the programs do cause red tape too, and it's essentially a regulatory thing. But here's the nasty part. Whoever gets to manage these kinds of programs always gets their cut.
That's freaking crazy.
Citibank.
Those are the NGOs, right?
In effect, yes. I mean, they aren't technically NGOs because NGO, but yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they technically are just non-government organizations, but they get their cut too. So people don't think about this. They're like, oh, the bank's helping me out. Oh, this is great. They're getting money out of it too. It's in their interest to do it. Now, by the way, sometimes they can lose money on that interaction, but it is a cash flow issue at worst for them. And so this is an arrangement of government that, again, I would reassert is unconstitutional. No such arrangements are authorized under any fashion in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, or certainly on this basis, helping people with home ownership. There's no constitutional authority to help homeowners. I mean, I know it feels really bad because people say, well, what about the poor homeowners who are shut out during COVID? Well, there's your clue. Because COVID shut down everyone's businesses, so they couldn't work. So no wonder you got homeowners in crisis. There's another government action. But the worst part of this, and COVID is another example of it, is what I term corporatism. Corporations lobby for these things, sometimes themselves under we want to help homeowners, and here's an idea for a program that'll help homeowners, knowing they're going to get a cut of it. But what's even worse are situations like the vaccines, where literally tens of billions of dollars were shelled out by the federal government so that Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson and the other people's vaccines whom they were paying for. Remember, nobody paid for a vaccine. It was only the federal government that paid for the vaccine. And who gets the money at the price they want? Without having to go through all the costs of getting it approved on a scientific, rational basis, even. That's
and a 75-year you can't touch us clause or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is crazy. And so this is what government does. The COVID vaccines are a prime example of what the federal government does that is not only unconstitutional, but is also not beneficial. Oh, there are always a few people who benefit. And I'm not going to say no one had their life saved from the vaccine. I'm not saying it was entirely inefficient. I'm just saying it mostly was. And even if you survived the vaccine, we're getting more and more science that you're not going to survive it in the long run, because of real long-term effects. Yeah. So like myocarditis and creepy string-like things in your veins that kill you. I mean, these are literal things that are happening on the back end of that. So I bring all that up just to say.
And that's not conjecture. That's real.
That's absolutely real. Like, it is.
There's scientific evidence now. So
that's right. I remember seeing the first pictures that people were putting out of mortuaries showing these stringy things in the veins. And I'm like, crazy. Okay, like I would believe the stupid way we went about this that might have happened, but that seems a little far-fetched. That's what I thought at first. I'll keep my eyes out. No, it's absolute fact now. And this is this is what government does. But it's not just Democrats that do this. I mean, there are a lot of Republicans out there saying, yeah, that's the way Democrats are. You got to take. No, Republicans do this kind of stuff. I mean, what about faith-based initiatives in the George W. Bush White House? There's no authority for faith-based initiatives to be funded out of the federal government. I mean, we want Christians to be strong in society, and we want them to have a free hand. But the way we do that is not by giving money to faith-based organizations. We do it by enforcing strictly the First Amendment, and the free exercise clause of it in particular, and then let the...
It's weird how they put that in there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Kind of funny, isn't it? But that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with government. Government is always a connection to harm. Even by the way, in one of the major roles of the federal government, the military, that even does harm, right? Yeah, even from a Christian perspective. I'm not a pacifist, but let's just keep in mind the theological concept of just war. Mainly promoted by Augustine, but expanded upon since. St. Augustine said that all war is evil, but some wars are necessary. And to win a war is not a cause for celebration, right? It's a horrible, evil necessity in a world to go awry. And so that's a destructive, I mean, it's not a productive activity of government. There are no productive activities that come out of government because you're taking money from someone to do something else. Even if it's something like the military that we really do need to do to protect ourselves, even that can get out of hand. I mean, look at the expeditionary wars that we've done around the world that were totally unnecessary. Vietnam was not necessary, right? We should never have gone into Iraq. You could make maybe a little bit of,
Weren't we looking for weapons of mass destruction?
Yeah, that never existed, right?
Right.
And you could maybe say we could go into Afghanistan for a few weeks because we did have credible evidence that the people who perpetrated it had come from Afghanistan. But even that might be a little bit questionable. Like what are Afghanis going to do? Because the problem was on our part. Our intelligence agencies messed up. The FBI messed up. It wasn't the airlines and the scanning procedures that you had at the time going to your airplane. We got the videos of those guys going there. They didn't have anything right there that could be stopped, or at least nothing significant. It was a failure of intelligence leading up to the point where they walked in to the aircraft that they end up flying into buildings. So there's just a whole lot of harm that government does. It's not highly useful, and just back to the sort of the original start here. The average American, it's hard for them to see this. They're seeing it better now than they ever have, thanks to Donald Trump and other politicians who have pointed these things out. Yeah. But they're just trying to live their lives, and it's a lot of hard work to have a free country. But we are based upon the principle of popular sovereignty. The government is not the United States. The people are. The people are not a subject to the government. The government's subject to the people. And we've got areas of subjection that we need to do. If you're speeding on the road and the cop stops you, you want to act honorably. But the only time those things intersect is when real harm is done by someone, however mild or great that is. And we hire the government to take care of those things and no more. Right. So that we need to, hopefully we're seeing a real pattern of rethinking all of this, all the way to the point that Scott Bessent, the current Treasury Secretary, just yesterday or the day before, I guess it was over the weekend, had an interview where he said, we need to investigate the Federal Reserve. And I know we're not going to get into this long discussion, but your money's not worth anything because we have a Federal Reserve, because we went off the gold standard. They fund massive government, and then all the big players we were talking about earlier get first mover advantage. They get to trade out their monetary instruments before the inflation kicks in because they're on the front end of the money printing. And you pay for all the inflation on the back end. Again, another destructive activity of government. Yeah. The dollar's worth 93% less now than 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act was passed. And it's all because of the Federal Reserve. People would say, oh, was that correlation or causation? It's causation. All
I
inflation
don't.
is caused by that.
And I told you before when you were on Kay's show, I'm like, geez, you might be the smartest man I've ever talked to about all this stuff. But I look at, and I think we're the same age. I just turned 57 the other day. I don't know how old you
You're
are,
a
but
young pup. I'm 3 years older than you are.
you are really, you're 60. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I know I don't look
Wow.
it.
Yeah, you don't. But when I think about, I hear about the Fed, Trump saying the Fed's an idiot and the Fed needs to. I don't even know I don't know what the Fed is. Like, I know it's some dude, and I remember Al Greenspan wasn't he the
Yeah.
Fed for a while?
Fed chairman, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what is that? You're saying chairman? Like, is it a corporation? What
Well,
is it?
It actually kind of is. It's a government authorized corporation institution. But the chairman of the Federal Reserve is chairman of the board of governors of the Fed. And there are regional boards of governors, boards of governors that are chaired by members of the board of governors. And so, like, for example,
governors, like state governor,
no, they just govern over the regional authority of the Fed. And so what the federal, just to simplify this, the Federal Reserve provides the backing for banks to be able to make loans, essentially.
Okay.
They provide, and they provide, they essentially also set the amount of money that's in the system.
Okay.
So that's why they cause inflation. Prior to the Federal Reserve, except for a couple quick dalliances away from it, prior to the Federal Reserve, the value of the dollar was set by the value of gold.
Right.
And I'm simplifying.
And how much we had, how much gold we had.
That's right. In fact, dollars were convertible in gold, and we also had silver certificates. So if you brought a dollar into a bank, you should be able to, or to the government, you should be able to get the same value of gold or silver back. Right. So, and that's kind of oversimplifying it. I don't want to try to take people down a technical path too far. But so the amount of gold we had, every dollar had to be convertible into gold, or, like I say, sometimes silver. Okay. That meant that the supply could only be equal to the amount of gold and or silver that the federal government had in its own possession. This is why we had Fort Knox. And that wasn't the only place we kept gold, but it was the main one.
Right.
In 1913, and this movement had been happening for some time, but in 1913, or around about that time, you had the Wilson administration, the Woodrow Wilson administration, really seeking to radically transform how government works. And they didn't have the money to do it, because you have a limited supply, and the Congress can't print money. It's got to go gather very real money in taxes, and we only had our tax structure was in tariffs. I mean, we literally funded the government out of tariffs up until that time, because the 16th Amendment passed near this same era too, which authorized the income tax. It was restricted in the Constitution. In fact, in the late 19th century, there was an attempt to create an income tax by Congress that was overturned by the Supreme Court. So anyway, so back to this. The government was looking for money to spend and ways to spend money.
Hold it. What year was that they went from tariffs to the federal income tax?
Ish. The 16th Amendment, it was like 1914 or 15.
Okay.
I mean, so the Federal Reserve Act and it might be the same year, 1913, but the Federal Reserve Act and the 16th Amendment, which allowed income tax, were all passed right about the same time.
Okay.
So double whammy. But so back to the Federal Reserve. So what changed was that we still had a gold standard, so to speak, but the Federal Reserve was the one who was to determine the value of money. So they were capable of printing money. We kind of sneaked away from the gold standard a little bit. So And in fact, the monetary policy of the Federal Reserve is really what caused the Great Depression, because they didn't make enough money available into the system. So think about this. When you have dollars, the flow of economic activity must be undertaken with the available dollars in the system.
Right.
So if you restrict the amount of dollars, then it's hard for people to get cash.
Right.
So literally the value of the dollars is the value of dollars in the system.
Right.
So if you fast forward to the Nixon administration, I think it was 72, when he changed the policy that dollars on the international market would be convertible in gold. So if any dollars that were out in the international market, if they presented it to the federal government, we had, after the Bretton Woods agreement in the 1940s, an agreement that we would exchange those dollars for gold. Again, to keep it safe. But we only did that on the international stage. We were not doing that here. When we went from that convertibility standard, suddenly the amount of dollars in the system is whatever the Fed printed. And they were authorized to do that because their mandate is to watch for inflation. They're supposed to help the economy. They're supposed to understand how many dollars are supposed to be in the system. It's an inexact science the way they do it, but they just do it anyway. So fast forward now to Biden. Literally, Biden's inflation that happened was entirely because the Federal Reserve printed, I think it was $3 trillion just out of thin air. Of course, they do it electronically nowadays.
Okay, but why? Who authorized that? Who said
the reason they did it? The reason they do it in almost every instance, and in fact, I would argue in every instance they do it, is to have dollars available so the government can pay its debts. That's literally it. Now, someone obviously much smarter than I on this, Milton Friedman, makes that very case. In fact, he says it almost doesn't matter what the tax rate is, because they may lower your taxes, but they're just going to print the money and you're going to pay in inflation.
Wow.
Government spending is the main driver of inflation, not the fact that tariffs are levied on some country, or oil prices go awry. I mean, it inflates in that localized industry, but overall inflation happens because of government spending. And the reason it does is because the Federal Reserve prints the money that allows the government to spend it. So, otherwise, the government couldn't spend it because it doesn't have the revenue.
So does Trump have the ability, or does the president have the ability to fire the chairman?
Yes.
Really?
He does. Now, there's some arguments that go both ways on this, but generally, yes. And most of the arguments against it come from the perspective that the Federal Reserve needs to be independent of politics. Well, I can prove to you, if we had a long time to talk about it, that it is not at all insulated from politics. It always makes political moves. And in fact, I think that Donald Trump's argument that Jay Powell's being political is quite true. He dropped interest rates last year by 0.5% when the inflation situation was much worse than it is right now. And he refuses to drop rates now, which the Federal Reserve says it does when inflation is in check, right? So it's totally political at some level. And but those who want the independence of the Fed are against the firing of the Federal Reserve Chairman. And I don't think you do it lightly either, to be candid.
Right.
So anyway, Jerome Powell's not coming back. The question is, will it be next May or will it be now? And we'll see what Donald Trump does.
What do you think he's going to do?
I think there's a chance he'll fire him.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced that he will. And I do think, and probably rationally so, Scott Bessent is in Donald Trump's ear saying, listen, he's going to be gone in May. What I do think he needs to do, instead of firing Powell, is he needs to immediately find a great replacement and announce that that person's going to be the replacement now. because no one's going to listen to Jerome Powell anymore. They're going to be listening to that person. They're going to be asking that person should be advancing Trump's policy and what it will be. It'll help the markets understand what's coming. It'll help weed out a lot of the challenges that person might have, because Democrats are going to be against whoever Donald Trump puts up there. It'll help flesh out who that person is more securely, so that they're ready for the hearings that they inevitably will have to have before Congress. And then they can come in hitting the ground running. And he's got a lot of good potential choices.
I think that something needs to happen. Yeah, and I think that he also look, Buckster's on here. I don't know what your time limitations are, Jim, but I certainly am grateful that you've on here as long as you have. I know you're a busy guy.
We got a good 15, 20 minutes at the most, so that's
okay.
Good.
Okay. I think, Trump is obviously really ticked off, and he should be. I think it sounds like he should be. I don't know enough about all this, but now I'm sitting here making mental notes going, okay, let's investigate this a little further, because I really want to know more about this. I think every American should learn about this. I remember Trump floating the idea around, and Grant Cardone is a friend of mine and a mentor and a good dude. And he's like, Grant's always posting, in the Fed, in the IRS, abolish it all, get rid of the federal income tax. And Trump even floated that idea out there. Like, hey, we need to go back to the, before we had this crap. Yeah. It sounds like we could do better, or at least as well or better, if we just would implement the tariff, have a really strong policy on the tariffs.
We need, when it comes to the tariffs, and I'm trying to look up something I'm going to send you here, but when it comes to the tariffs, I think that we could fund the government with tariffs if two things happen. We need to reduce federal spending, and we need to get rid of the income tax.
Yeah.
We could go back to a renaissance. And, Peter St. Onge, the PhD economist, connected with Heritage Foundation, he does some other stuff too. He makes a great argument, and I'll send this to you on the back end, because I think I have it, but not quickly. He makes an exact argument as to why we actually could go to the gold standard again. It is possible. And we were having, people talk about the Gilded Age and all the wealthy people, the Vanderbilts and stuff in the late 19th century. They're taking advantage of all Americans and hoarding wealth and all this kind of stuff. Well, listen, to a degree, there was some hoarding of wealth, but that was easily going to go away. What was really more happening at that time was innovation was skyrocketing. Like, you had the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers and some of them that did really, really well, Carnegie. But in reality, the country as a whole was booming. It wasn't just the most wealthy. Everybody was beginning to reap the benefits of the free society that we had at that time for 120 years.
Right.
That was finally working its way through after the Civil War and the aftermath. With that was harmful to the country. We started coming out of all that, and poverty was reducing greatly. Education was expanding, sometimes because of the philanthropic efforts of those uber wealthy people. Right? I'm not saying they were perfect or that they weren't greedy, but the thing is, in economic terms, I don't say greed is a good thing, as you've heard famously said in the movies.
Yeah, right.
But what I am saying is greed cannot stop people benefiting from a free market society. Because think about this. If you have the greediest jerk in the world and they want to become a billionaire, what do they have to do? Well, first of all, they have to create a product that people find useful and want to buy, right?
Yeah.
They have to have a set of employees such that those employees can produce that product or service in an effective, efficient manner that will cause people to keep buying it. Then once you've built a little success, you got to go back to your customers and say, okay, here's what we've been doing. What more could we do? Or what other things are interesting to you, right? They're asking them that question. You're
Right.
keeping advancing your employees, so you have a lot of long-standing employees who have institutional knowledge that can allow you to continue to grow. Now, think about what's happening in this cycle. At the end of this process, you could be the greediest jerk in the world and become a billionaire by following the golden rule. Like, in a free market society, not that it's perfect. I mean, I always say 6,000 years of recorded human history proves the radical corruption of mankind. I mean, we're all corrupt
Right.
at some level, right? The
Right,
Bible
right.
says in Romans 3, we all sin. No one is righteous, not one.
Not
By
one.
God's standard, we're not. And we do harm. And I mean, just think of the last argument you had with your spouse, right?
Yep.
That was, in 9 times out of 10, that was probably sinful. And you did it, and we do bad. But the thing is, to mitigate this problem, free markets, when it comes in economic terms, free markets work the best at mitigating those problems. Because even even Andrew Carnegie had sort of a conversion of sorts of saying, listen, I made all this wealth, now I'm going to give it all back. And he gave it all back.
Yeah.
And into society, there's incentive in the heart to want to do those sorts of things amongst some people, but even the ones that die greedy aren't going to keep it, and it's going to get dispersed out anyway. In the long run, when we allow people to make their own decisions about their lives, we do far better as a society than having some government bureaucrat or some politician tell you how you ought to do it. And it's antithetical. It's antithetical to Scripture. And I could spend a long time on that. But back to the Federal Reserve, we could really have the same kind of prosperity that I was just describing and talking about from the late 19th century if we went back to the gold standard. There will be some economists, there'll be politicians that tell you people die. They're literally said that people were going to die over the pulling back of funding recently, both in the Big Beautiful Bill and they said they were going to die because NPR is not going to get its $1.1 billion.
Well, that's because I mean, I think about, I don't think people think enough about this, but when like I'm not a huge fan of Lindsey Graham, for example, at all. But, people keep going, well, how's he keep getting reelected? It's because he's got a massive war chest build up from all of the money he's received, right? He's sitting on a ton of money, correct?
Yeah, he raised a lot of money, and you got to raise money as a politician. But I think it's something, two things much worse than that. One of them is that we've always kind of had a two-party system throughout our history, but it got institutionalized in law through the 20th century. So now it's hard to get on the ballot if you're not a Democrat or Republican, because the laws restrict you. They make it difficult. Right. And because if you were capable of being a third party and doing anything, either the Libertarian Party or the Reform Party would have been able to. They were both connected to popular movements, neither of them irrational in their desire for change. So it's not like they had, I guess the Libertarian Party kind of did, but mostly they didn't have these icky policy ideas that seemed so weird.
Right.
But yet the ballot placement and some other issues in the law make it very difficult for a third party to come about. So that's part of it, because now you have this binary choice. If he's got a lot of money, then someone's got to beat him in a primary. And it looks like he's going to have a credible primary challenger, a former lieutenant governor who's very popular in the state of South Carolina. We'll see how that goes. We'll probably back that person as an organization. But that it's hard to get through that primary process. And then once you do, now you've either got this radical leftist Democrat who doesn't even believe in America, and this corrupt Republican who just plays the system in Washington, D.C. and never does anything that the people want. Well, in my opinion, even that bad Republican's better than Mamdani from New York, who's a communist, right?
Oh, my gosh.
So, by comparison, it's better, but it's not good.
Right.
And there's too much not good that people are voting for. But here's a second potential problem. And I mean this with all due respect to everyone listening. It's also up to us. Like, we have to step up and tell these people we're done with you. And you got to take some risks to do that. And until we can, that also is going to be a problem, because we are a country founded on popular sovereignty. We are the kings and queens of this country, collectively and individually. And it says it right there in the beginning of the Constitution. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Like, the government didn't form us, we did. And they're accountable to us. And we need to do probably a bit more to demand that accountability of our politicians. That's a tough battle. And Donald Trump's helped us a lot with that. I'm a big fan of Donald Trump, and I think he really has helped break a lot of those strangleholds. And I'm hopeful he can continue with some success. He's had one of the most successful administrations in total already, only after 6 months. So I'm very pleased with what's been happening.
I think, and again, I know you're running out of time, and I want to be respectful. And I want to get it. I mean, I wish we could just stay on here all day, honestly, because I think that you've got so much knowledge that the average person just doesn't think about. And so talk a little bit about, well, and I want to make a point. Jerome Powell, I'm sure he's making at least $100,000 a year for the job he does, right?
Oh, try. I don't know what exactly it is, but try on the range of 200 to 300. So yeah.
At least, yeah. So Buck said, "Let the man cook." He's got to go. He's got other commitments, Buck. But I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk to everybody about the Conservative Caucus and what your role is there, what everything you're doing, and any final words that you want to lay out to everybody. I'm going to give you full screen to do that. I out of respect, you're a brilliant man. And I really think that everybody on X and everywhere should be following you and listening to what you have to say, because it's very important.
Well, I appreciate that. And real quickly, Jerome Powell makes $190,000 a year.
That's it.
I just looked it up.
I was joking. I figured it was going to be like 100 million or something.
Yeah, no. Anthony Fauci made near 400,000 a year. I mean, just think about that for a second. Yeah. So, but back to us. I mean, and again, just stating those two salaries amongst those two people who have done so much harm to this country. What we're about at the Conservative Caucus is actually exposing such things, helping people understand what those things mean and put them in perspective in their lives. Much of the latter portion of our conversation today is the type of thing that I'm trying to communicate to people on a regular basis, and that we as an organization try to communicate so people can understand what the problem is. We were founded in 1974 by, for those old enough to remember, a very famous icon of the conservative movement, Howard Phillips. Howard was a wonderful advocate for liberty in this country. We're actually the nation's oldest conservative grassroots organization. And the foundation then, and it remains so now, is a belief that the Constitution is the best guide for how we do the government. That Americans are should not only be protected by the fact that the federal government restrains itself to the Constitution, which we will constantly work towards, but that the Constitution implications even into state level and local level politics. So that when you go in front of your school board, they can't tell you you're not allowed to talk down to transgendered people when you're promoting that. And in fact, we would argue, as happened in Loudoun County that year that Glenn Youngkin became governor, when there was such a transgender brouhaha, there's a famous video of a parent going in front of a school board and getting manhandled to the ground because they raised their voice and they demanded answers. And then you found out some weeks later, this guy's daughter was raped by a transgender male in the bathroom in the school, and the school was trying to hide it. When we don't hold government accountable, these kinds of problems propagate, they fester, and they get out of control. We were on the verge during the Biden administration, and really for the last 10 years, of being overwhelmed by a bureaucratic deep state that operates or has operated essentially independent of accountability to the American people. The Conservative Caucus is about shedding light on these problems, supporting those who are seeking to change or affect what happens with these problems, and then to give people the tools that they need to figure out how to address these issues in their local community, and then work with us to push Washington, D.C. to get it right. All on the basis of the Constitution, on the fact that God's moral law is the law of the universe, that rights are granted by God to human beings. Couldn't be more clearly expressed as in the great mantra of our founding, the Declaration of Independence. We are endowed by our Creator with these certain inalienable rights. And we want to assert those in the public square and give people the tools to do so, and to give them direction on what's happening in a faithful manner so that they can take action.
I love that. So how do people get involved with what you're doing? Just go to theconservativecaucus.com and
they should go to theconservativecaucus.com. Lots of links there, links to our social media. Sign up for our email if you want to get that information or other types of contact. And of course, if you want to help us with a contribution, you can do that. But we have some grassroots training material on that website, and you can take advantage of those too. So then beyond that, on X, our handle is TC Caucus. You can find us also on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Truth Social. All these platforms you can find us. We're just putting out information regularly, whether it's me talking about this or that thing, like in a situation like this, or other bits of information, how they can take action and contact their representatives and that sort of thing.
Is that it right there?
That's
at
it.
TC?
That's right.
On X, and follow you, Jim, at Jim Pfaff, right?
Yeah, at JIMPFAFF, Jim Pfaff.
I'll throw that up there too. So
okay.
You can get some. I mean, we're right now trending on X at number 2 on live streams. So that's pretty
great.
Cool. Thank you to everybody who's shared this out. It's been phenomenal. And as you can tell, if you're not following Jim, stop that right now and start following Jim. Uh-oh. He just went offline again. Uh-oh. Let's see if he comes back. Let me go back up here. So make sure you... Oh, he's back. He's back. Here we go.
Yeah. I was refreshing the wrong screen. I was trying to verify if we were number 2, and I was on the wrong browser. Sorry.
It's all right. I see it at number 2. Oh no, we just dropped to number 3. It looks like. Daggone it, Mario Nawfal. That's all right though. I'm very. I have screenshots.
People, that's great.
Yeah. But I think that I have screenshots. We've been trending number 2 for a while. But I think that everybody needs to follow you and gosh, talk this man into giving you his cell phone number or something. I'm kidding. But no, Jim, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate your knowledge, your wisdom. My wife put the link up here as well for your website, theconservativecaucus.com. Thank you, Jill. I appreciate that. And follow this organization as well. And do you teach people how to get involved locally, how to really start making a difference on a local level? You're muted or something. I can't hear you.
I must accidentally hit the mute. The tools we have online are applicable to any kind of grassroots work, and they're proven skills and training. When they sign up on our website, it'll take them to a page where they can access a lot of that info, both written and video things to help train them, and we'll put more out as time goes on.
That's
Yeah, but
awesome.
we do want to help people on the local level, not just the federal level, and they can make a huge difference.
Well, that's kind of where it starts, it seems. So, Jim, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we wrap this up?
No, the only thing I'd want to say is thank you everyone for listening and wanting to listen to me. I know a lot of these people are people that hear me on Spaces, and I do try to hopefully provide not just a voice of reason. I want to be reasonable and rational, but I also want to really make people aware that, I've got some knowledge to bring, and I try to bring that in, and I hope that that's helpful. And a lot of people tell me that it is. But more importantly, I want to help validate people who, using that information that they may not have, are more than smart enough and capable enough to figure out how to make change in their country. Because at the end of the day, it's the American people that are going to make us great. Government does not make us great in any way. Government's job is to allow us and to make sure that we have the tools and ability to do what we need to do. And there are very limited things they need to do for that purpose. So we need to restrain and pull back government as far as we can, and we're only going to do that with the wisdom of the American people. It's not going to be Jim Pfaff's wisdom that's going to get it done, and I'm going to use what I have and make it helpful, but it's your actions that get it done. So I just want to encourage you that way, and do please follow us, subscribe, whatever, at theconservativecaucus.com.
Amen and amen and amen. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate you. If you would stay with me, I'm going to end the live stream. If you can hang on for another couple minutes here.
Sure.
Thank you to everybody who's been on here and shared this out. You're a bunch of rock stars. I really appreciate that. Make sure you're following Jim and the Conservative Caucus on X, and go over to theconservativecaucus.com and sign up for the newsletter and everything else. So thank you all so much. Jim, stay with me. We'll see you guys later. Have a great day.